So here we are. We just have to finish off this confidence interval before we can move on to the next thing. I just typed up the answers right here. And again, remember, because I chose to do a lot minus a little, when I went into StatCrunch, I accidentally did it the reverse, which is all right. It just shows you what happens. It just makes them negative then. But either way, notice what's not in that interval. 0 is not in that interval. And remember, our hypothesis test was testing whether that difference was equal to 0, and we said no, it's not, because our test statistic is far away. Another way to think of it is that the confidence interval doesn't contain 0 either. And I've also got to interpret that confidence interval. So we are, which I know I forgot to do at the end of 11 too, but it's not a big deal. We are 95% certain, confident that the true difference in proportions of aggressive behavior between groups that watch a lot of TV and those that don't is between 13.28% and 25.11%. Awesome. Done with that. Now we move on to McNemar's test. So sometimes proportions are not from independent samples. I mean, if you look up here with this aggressive act stuff, the thing about it is these were 707 families randomly selected. They're not going to have any bearing on each other for the most part. So, I mean, there's some argument to be made about whether or not this is a large enough sample, but we can have that argument out. But in general, students that watch a lot of TV and those that don't watch a lot of TV are independent of each other. You know, just because I watch TV doesn't mean your family's going to do it, or vice versa. Okay? But down here, this is talking about what happens when it's matched pairs. What happens when you're testing the proportion differences and the groups are completely interwoven and dependent upon each other? Well, that creates a different problem for us. This happens a lot in medical testing, especially. So they've shown it up here. So you have treatment A, you have treatment B. Did you succeed on both of them? Did you succeed on one but fail on the other? So for example, F11 is a patient that succeeded with both treatments. Both treatments made it better or whatever. Over here, F12 on the right would be a person who failed to get better with treatment A but succeeded with treatment B. Down here would be a person that failed with treatment B but succeeded with treatment A. And over here in the far right corner would be a person who doesn't get better with either treatment. Okay? The total number of observations, oops, that's a typo, observations, where the outcome must be greater than or equal to 0. So in other words, F12 plus F21, these two must be greater than or equal to 10. All right, so then we're going to have the same 6 steps as before, more or less. You're going to determine your null and alternative hypotheses. You're going to compute test statistic. You're going to have, oops, poof, like magic. Okay, I don't know what happened to my p-value method, but now they're both there. Everything's good. Okay, so we're going to determine our null and alternative hypothesis, state our level of significance, find our test statistic, which is quite frankly much easier to find than the last ones we've been finding. Now notice, because of this absolute value thing, that means that we're always going to have a positive test statistic no matter what. So even though it's a two-tailed test, we really only need the right critical value to find, even though, you know, the negative one would be the opposite, but because you're always going to be comparing a positive. So you're only interested in if Z0 is greater than Z alpha over 2. And then over here you've got our p-value method as well. Right here. So that one, we will consider both tails because we'll have to make the p-value from it. All right, so let's go down here, oopsie, and find our first problem. Our job is to determine whether or not belief in heaven and belief in hell are going to be independent. So a recent social survey asked subjects whether they believed in heaven and whether they believed in hell. For the 1120 subjects who responded, the table shows in contingency table form. There they are. The rows are the response categories for belief in heaven and hell. One would imagine that those aren't independent, right? But besides just feeling it that way, you know that it has to be the case because this is the same group of 1120. So if you knew this 833, you'd know what the other numbers have to be dependent upon that 833, which means that it's all dependent. And that's what I'll write up, and see you here next time.